The pros are finally playing on the new patch, and boy did they experiment with some crazy stuff. Both Baptiste comps and multi-DPS got whipped out on the first day of Stage 2, and there was this little comp called 3-3 that was still kind of rolling over everything whenever it got played, but we'll leave that off to the side. My therapist told me only to talk about happy thoughts. First up, the Guangzhou Charge go for quite an interesting strategy. This actually looked like a ranked game. The Charge take on the Clown Fiesta head-to-head, fighting fire with fire, attempting to use their double barrier and defense matrix and immortality field to outlast the barrier damage that the enemy could put out. But the major thorn in their side was the Sombra harassing, farming EMP, hacking the Bastion, what have you, soon overall just being a general nuisance. And I'm just gonna say, I don't think this attack Bastion is a thing. Maybe if you get Symmetra involved somehow, so you actually have some mobility to get somewhere quickly. The problem is, if you take such a slow attack, looking like a Terran v Terran tank battle from StarCraft 2, shout out to anybody who remembers those days, you're just never really finding yourself in useful ground. The main kicker of all of this being, the Paris Eternal have a trump card to this engagement entirely with Cruz's immortality field that can actually hide around a corner. I think this is one of those types of lessons that get learned very hard, and once you realize that the field is more or less out of view completely, I think you got to conclude any damage trying to shoot up at the high ground is just going to be all for naught. The Charge keep trying to storm the beach of Normandy, never get into useful ground, and can't even get to use their ultimates. They're so slow and easily manipulated. What do I think they should have done? Well, anything with mobility is good, and I think using your Diva's defense matrix to buy you 2 seconds where the Bastion can't shoot any of your team to then W somewhere useful. Get flanks, get surround, start pressuring the point. Have heroes that can self-sustain on the fringes of the battle rather than playing a mass immobility comp attempting to win with firepower. Knockbacks or boops are incredibly key as well, so setting up for Wrecking Ball to slide in to get some knockoffs, having a Pharmacy poke over the top, trying to use Conk Blast. Once you surround them and get them displaced a little bit, then you can divide and conquer, and the attacking team does have a respawn advantage. It's not massive, but getting your pathing right for this kind of problem is always going to be key. And speaking of pathing, we got to see the NYXL play this map as well, going up against the Bunker comp. Not against the Baptiste this time, but I think just using your matrix to W in the right direction would have avoided it anyway. And this is the type of example that I think shows why the speed boost nerf wasn't as significant as people thought. Even with a man disadvantage. Because EQO makes a mistake with his barrage, he goes down, then after that point, the entire fight is over. The 3-3 comp can afford to lose a member, whereas this bunker defense, almost no matter what you have in the damage slot, will never be able to kill a 3-3 if your damage player dies. Animo was farming up sound barrier anyway, so even if EQO lives, unless the barrage kills 2, the overshield of the sound barrier is still gonna let them close the distance and overwhelm you, get onto the objective, and be a massive pain. And then here's the part of the video where I give us the bad news that, well, sustained comps are still incredibly strong. It's cool that we're seeing way more triple DPS, which makes me wonder the motivation for teams trying to run them. You see, like here, with damage, Fusion is able to completely take control of all of the relevant map space on point A of Paris here, but the sustained tactics of putting your tanks out to absorb damage, stall the objective, get healed up, run away, come back and do it again, or simply just make coordinated dives out to go for a squishy target, so reliably gets kills and drains clock off the time bank that even when you run this strat and lose against damage, it's still more efficient to play the objective this way. That's why I'm worried. Now, it might take the best triple support teams to get this to work. Up against damage comps, you see more Moira or Ana, who are less exploitable than Zenyatta, and you don't really need the extra damage amp up against squishy targets anyway. It's more of a tank bust thing when you're in a 3-3 mirror. So overall, not the greatest of news. And granted, it's only been a day, but I still think we can evaluate that 3-3 fares incredibly strong up against damage. But it is nice to see pro teams look at least like they can feel comfortable going to comps other than 3-3 and have a fighting chance, rather than easily lose to 3-3. It's still the top dog comp and a must pick in a few situations, but at least right now we're seeing more experimentation, which is great. Another comp comp that we saw quite a bit on day one was the triple DPS Wrecking Ball comps. This is one that I think you really want to take notes on because it translates so well to the way that ranked gets played oftentimes. I mean, everybody wants to pick DPS, right? So if you are one of those DPS or a tank player wondering what the heck to play, Wrecking Ball definitely is the answer. And there's a reason for this, because realistically, this is a power creeped version of old triple DPS that used to get played with Winston. But now, with Wrecking Ball, you have a character that has such a high peak and potential impact, where he just goes off and frags easily on his own, and also has the potential for insane amounts of self-sustain, putting up to 600 health points onto him. He's one of your best options to have a mechanical fighting chance as a solo tank up against these DPS threats. Because otherwise, Winston has to jump in, commit, place his bubble down, and the DPS can out-footsie him to do an overwhelming amount of damage to Winston, whereas Wrecking Ball has the option to run in and out of combat, still harassing and being a threat, and probably the biggest surprise of the character overall is that he has quite consistent ranged damage. It's similar in effectiveness to Orisa's fusion driver, actually, and it's a hit scan, making it better. Otherwise, the core damage dealers in triple DPS are Tracer, Sombra, and Widowmaker. I think on some maps you can get away with Hanzo, Pharah, depending on how the map's laid out and what the enemy is running. But the reason why you're going to see Tracer, Sombra, Widow on maps like Busan is because they're so reliably self-sufficient. Sombra can go in, harass, translocate out, Tracer can poke, and as long as the lines of sight are long enough, Widowmaker's grapple shot can get her to the other side of the map in an instant. And what all of these characters do running in unison with each other is dovetail the angles of control that they take, so that hopefully the pressure from one side leads up to an angle for another DPS to get damage. So what they do is split up across the map, poking from multiple angles until something breaks. Honorable mention goes to Soldier 76, who did see some play yesterday, but you should consider that map specific and maybe a potential swap in for the Tracer. The biggest hero you don't want to lose out on is Sombra, because she adds the most value overall to making sure that this type of comp works. If you're under threat of a hack, lots of dive threats are going to struggle up against it, and realistically, Sombra is nearly a must-pick up against characters like Wrecking Ball, Doomfist, Contestant Enemy, Tracer, or Genji if they were to dare run it. Sombra overall puts in good damage herself, but her role largely is to support her team with the Disable, which can get picks outright. The exciting thing about this coming back into the game is that it starts to make angles, line of sight, and map control matter so much more all of a sudden. You can be forgiven to be easily distracted by the awesome Shadowburn 4K on the streets of Eichenwald, but if you're a nerd like me, there's a lot to get excited about with the way that this multi-DPS comp holds the map and forces the defense to struggle to get out to even have a chance to contest the payload. Cloudy on the Wrecking Ball goes deep, pressuring them back into this corner. He gets outplayed here by being chain stunned, losing his life, but the cool thing about this is the team was playing around that engagement, so the angles of the Soldier from the distance, Sombra on the side, and Pharah over the top were all able to collapse. So although it looks kind of like a feed from the tank, because he goes in and pile drives them, it sets them up for so much more follow-up damage, that as long as Shadowburn takes advantage of that, he's at a huge advantage. Really exciting stuff, and I can't wait to get more into what I'm gonna call classic Overwatch, setting up for your damage dealer to do something rather than watching a brawl for the last year, getting excited about how a cooldown was used. Yeah, if you've been following me on Twitter, you know I've been kind of ranting about people glorifying the depth of the GOATS meta and how big brain it is. Yeah, when you play it in a mirror, it's definitely very impressive. The grand final of Stage 1 showed us that. But outside of the mirror, GOATS running over the enemy because they just don't have as much sustain is not very deep at all. And instead, I'm excited to start to look more at map control, setting up your teammates' angles, and lots of this other, frankly, more difficult Overwatch gameplay being utilized again. I don't know if I'm convinced that 3-3 is gone enough, but if day one is any indication of what pros want to be playing on this patch, I'll be a happy guy. I just hope that they don't all realize that DPS is still incredibly inefficient for playing the objective and then swap back to it nonstop. Only time will tell, but that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, please be sure to leave a like. It really does help us out, lets us know that you're enjoying the content, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.